John Oldman, now calling himself John Young, is lighting the fire by creating sparks from the friction of wood. Later, John is looking at Stone Age cave paintings in a museum. Over the past decade, John has created a new identity in a new city. He's a lecturer on theology courses at the university and is in a relationship with one of his colleagues, Professor Caroline. However, John had not yet told Caroline that he is a Cro-Magnon who has lived for 14,000 years. At the prehistoric museum, Professor Caroline was teaching her students about Homo sapiens and the Holocene epoch. Meanwhile, Isabel, a student, is sketching primitive human fossils while her friend Tara waits for her work to be completed. Suddenly, Tara notices Professor John. Upon seeing John alone, both of them approached him and started talking. Tara attempted to take a selfie with John, but he moved away, avoiding the camera. He then informed Isabel that if she needed books to read, she could come to his house and get them. Saying this, he leaves. At night, John notices that wrinkles are increasing on his face, and his hair is turning gray. He remembers the farewell party 10 years ago, when Edith said he wasn't aging at all, but now it seems he's getting older. The next day in class, John tells the students about the Buddha's teachings. He explains that according to the teachings of the Buddha, people have the power to change everything. Greed turns into generosity, anger turns into compassion, and ignorance becomes wisdom. A discussion begins about Buddha, and Tara says that he was a god, but John denies this, saying that he was an ordinary man who thought about humanity for a long time and attained enlightenment. Tara compared Buddha to Jesus, and a debate began. Students began to argue that Jesus suffered for the people, whereas the Buddha wanted to get rid of suffering. Philip says that Jesus was no ordinary man. He was the Son of God, and as we all know, he was resurrected, which means that Jesus was God. John says that we cannot accept as facts those things that cannot be proved on the basis of evidence, and God is beyond any evidence or logic. He tells them that they can believe in God or Jesus, but only in the form of faith. With this lesson, he ends his lecture. At night, John is cooking dinner. Meanwhile, Isabel comes and asks for some books. John was busy cooking at the time, so he asked Isabel to take the books from the shelf herself. While Isabel is looking through books, she finds a book called Shadow of the Caveman, written by Professor Art, the same book that Art gifted to John in the previous part of the film. Isabel takes the book and leaves. When Caroline comes home, John tells her he wants to go hunting, but Caroline invites him to a party. Meanwhile, Isabel reads Professor Art's book, which she borrowed from John. She tells Tara that Professor Art Jenkins has gifted the book to her dear friend, John Oldman. Tara noticed that the book was published in 2007, which means that John would have been 33 years old at that time. So why would he be called an old man? Isabel found information about Professor Art on the internet and discovered that he is a renowned archaeologist who has written several books, including My Longest Night with the Man from Earth. This book recounts a night spent with a university professor named John Oldman, who claimed to be 14,000 years old. However, that book led to his downfall, as Art claimed that the Savior himself is a practicing Buddhist who walks among us in the guise of a handsome, mild-mannered university professor. As a result, Art gained a bad reputation and was expelled from the college even before retirement. Tara remarks that the description sounds like Jung. After reading numerous negative comments about a renowned writer like Art, Isabel and Tara decide to read the book. At night, Caroline finds John preparing to go hunting. He says he needs to be alone. He feels something is not right. Caroline says it's called old age, and if he wants to hide in the woods like a caveman, he can go. After a long ride, John reaches the forest, climbs to the top of a hill, and inspects the surroundings. John has spent a long time with nature and has gotten used to it. Meanwhile, Isabel and Tara reach Philip's home, where Liko is also present. They excitedly inform Philip and Liko that Professor Art has written a non-fiction book about a man named John Oldman, who has lived for the last 14,000 years. He was born as a caveman and somehow became immortal. In the past, he has also met Columbus and Van Gogh and changes his place and name every 10 years. He knew Buddha, and the surprising thing is that everything they have heard about Jesus matches this man. However, Liko and Philip say that it is not necessary that if the book is non-fiction, then the things written in it will be true. Isabel mentions that Professor Art has published several books and that they did extensive research on John Oldman before writing the book. Surprisingly, it turned out that John Oldman didn't exist until 2001. There is no mention of it anywhere. Even all the documents, like his driving license and tax returns, were found to be fake. Professor Art also discovered 2 of John's previous colleges where he taught, one under the name of John Magdal and the other under the name of John Permian. All the documents found at those colleges were also fake. Isabel reveals that John Young is actually John Oldman. According to Professor Art, John always avoids getting photographed. He always runs away from the camera by making some excuse or another. This is the only photo of him in the entire book, and in this photo too, John has tried his best to hide his face. Meanwhile, in Searchlight, Nevada, Professor Art Jenkins is gardening with his pet pig, Betsy. When he goes into the house, he receives an email from Isabel in which she wants to talk to him about John Oldman. But the professor suddenly becomes emotional and replies that it would be better if she went to hell. Isabel and her friends break into John's house to find more evidence, where they see a painting by Van Gogh but believe it to be a fake. Liko goes to the basement and finds a box full of books, all of them written by different authors, but the name is the same, John. In the forest, John tries to make a tool out of stone while remembering his old memories, when suddenly his hand gets injured and starts bleeding. He spends the night in the forest and realizes that something is wrong with him, as his wounds are not healing as well as before. Isabel leaves a voice message for Professor Art, expressing her conviction that Professor John Young is actually John Oldman. She also shares the name of her college with Art. Upon hearing this, Art visits the college's website and confirms that John Young's name is indeed on the list, but there is no accompanying photo of John. Meanwhile, after spending a night in the forest, John departs for his home. Isabel and her friends sent emails with John's photo to 60 colleges in 14 different states, hoping that someone might recognize him. Coincidentally, Isabel receives a call from an elderly woman who once worked at a college in Idaho. The woman explains that in 1957, John was a professor of anthropology at their college. His name was John Place, and he was a unique person, but he suddenly disappeared somewhere. Saying this, the woman hangs up. Right after this, Professor Art contacts Isabel and tells her that he needs to see the photo of John Young. Otherwise, he has nothing to discuss. The trio arrives at class early and tries to take a photo with their favorite teacher, but he succeeds in hiding his face and demands the phone be turned off. Frustrated, the students discuss what to do. Isabel suggests that they should talk to Professor Young and tell him that they know the truth. In history, there were many prophets and divine men and women on earth who were in contact with God. John may also be one of them, and if he is 14,000 years old, then he would be the most intelligent person on earth. So they should listen to him and follow him. She suggests creating a new religion and explains that they can rectify all the inaccuracies written about Jesus. However, Philip argues that if they do so, everything believed by millions of people would be turned into fiction. He strongly disagrees. However, Isabel does not give up. She goes to John's house at night with Liko and takes pictures of him. Professor Art receives John's photo, but he's not convinced. If it's John, he's changed. He tells Isabel that he wants to talk to John and that he will be arriving soon. Meanwhile, Tara comes to John's office and confesses her love. She tries to get closer, but John maintains his composure. Tara says she knows her truth. Upon hearing this, John kicks her out. Tara goes to Isabel and tells her that she accidentally revealed to John that we know who he is. Hearing this, Isabel realizes that he will definitely disappear. She immediately contacts Art and informs him that John may be leaving soon. Art insists they must somehow stop him and promises to arrive in 2 hours. John says goodbye to Caroline. She did not understand why he was leaving, as everything was fine. John says he said from the beginning that he would eventually move on. The woman is upset but wishes him a Merry Christmas and leaves. John burns the pictures in the fireplace and packs his things. Just then, the students arrive and try to convince John to stay tonight. John asks why they want this. It sounds like stalking. Isabel says that they have read Professor Art's book and know the whole truth about John. Hearing this, John apologizes and replies that this book is a fictional story. Isabel says they want to help her spread the word of God. John says that he's an ordinary teacher. He's not Jesus. Saying this, as he turns back, Liko shocks him with a taser, causing John to lose consciousness. Meanwhile, Professor Art tells Isabel that his car has broken down and he is an hour away. Isabel goes with her friends to pick up Art, while Philip stays behind to take care of John. He takes John to the basement and ties him to a chair. A few moments later, John regains consciousness and asks Philip to release him. Philip insists that John must stay to uncover the truth. John, visibly upset, denies holding any secrets. He questions Philip's deep faith in Jesus, to which Philip shares his childhood trauma. His mother endured abuse from his alcoholic father until they eventually sought refuge in a church where they got solace and a new life. This experience forged a special bond with Jesus in their lives. Philip admits that John is the best teacher and knows much more about the Bible than others. He sees something different in John. Maybe he is the Son of God sent by God to earth to spread his message. However, if he's Jesus, then the Bible is just fiction. Philip asks for the truth, and John explains that 2,000 years ago, he preached on a hill in Galilee. He spoke some basic truths that he had learned over the years, but when the Gospels were written, people called John the Christ, and things went in a different direction than he expected. It became violent and scary, so he left. John reveals that something has changed recently. Wrinkles are appearing on his face, gray hairs are visible, and he's unable to heal his wounds. He doesn't know what's happening, but he's changed. Maybe he is dying, or maybe he's just changing. Saying this, he asks again to free him. Philip takes a knife, but suddenly stops and tells John that if he is the Son of God, then he can go free himself. John says he's just a human being. Philip begins to question again and becomes angry because some of John's answers contradict his beliefs in the Bible. He's not satisfied with John's explanations and concludes that he's not Christ, but the Antichrist. John objects, stating that the concept of the Antichrist is not found in the Bible. It was invented by superstitious monks and lacks any connection to a specific person. He reminds Philip that a minute ago he believed him to be Jesus, and now he is labeling him as the Antichrist. However, Philip accuses John of being the seven-headed beast from the Book of Revelation, capable of miraculous healing and intending to amass followers on earth. John laughs at Philip's comment, suggesting that if Philip believes him to be a beast, then Philip should end the story by killing him. However, if John is indeed Jesus, according to the Bible, he should still be alive after death. Confused by John's response, Philip impulsively thrusts the knife into John's stomach, causing him to lose consciousness. Seeing this, Philip becomes frightened and flees the scene. Meanwhile, Isabel tries to contact Philip but receives no response. Concerned, they all rush to John's house and notice bloodstains on the floor leading to the basement. Upon investigation, they find a broken chair soaked in blood. They try to understand what might have happened. They speculate that there may have been a scuffle between John and Philip and that John has left. However, Art points out that the Van Gogh painting is still there, and John can never leave it behind. A few days after this incident, John is seen in a cave, awakened by the sound of footsteps. It's Harry, who has come to deliver some important items to him. It turns out that John had written him the letter. They are meeting after 10 years, and in these 10 years, John has changed a lot. His beard has turned gray, and he looks tired. He tells John that his wounds still hurt. It never took him this long to heal. There is something different going on with him, but he can't understand. However, he hopes to find out soon. He tells Harry that he has chosen his new name, Holocene Man. But Harry says that name does not suit him, because the Holocene epoch is now ending and the Anthropocene epoch has begun. Humans have changed the environment so much that an era is coming to an end. John gets emotional and says that with the end of an era, maybe his too is coming to an end, as no one can live forever. Harry asks for John's help. His father has been ill for some time, and he wants to invite John to his house, as he thinks his father would like to meet John. John accepts the invitation and goes with Harry. In the mid-credits scene, an FBI agent comes to Professor Art's house and informs him that they are searching for his book's character, John Oldman, who also goes by the names John Young and several others, as they suspect him to be involved in Philip's kidnapping. Art says that John can never harm anyone unnecessarily. The agent claims that John's description matches that of a man who was long dead. But he's been seen by many people committing many violent crimes in different time periods. The agent asks Art if he thinks John could be an immortal serial killer. John says anything is possible in this world.